Good morning and welcome to episode 37 of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. I'm your host, Andrea. Now, Alex was going to be here with us, and we've already recorded this episode once, but when I checked the audio quality, it was horrible, so there was no way I'm going to let that seep into your ears. So, Alex is asleep while I'm re-recording, so it's just going to be us today, okay? Well, as you know, last week we started a 6-part series about the Moors murders in the UK, and we talked about the murder of Pauline Reed. Well, here's a quick recap if you missed it. Pauline was a 16-year-old, and she was the first victim of Myra, Hindley, and Brady. And even though she was their first victim, her grave in the Moors was the very last one to be located, and wasn't located until the 1980s. Today's episode focuses on the second young victim of Hindley and Brady, and it's 12-year-old John Kilbride.
Mystery, murder, and magic. Heroes, Andrea, and Alex.
Now, little John Kilbride, he was born on May 15th, 1951, to Patrick and Sheila Kilbride. Well, on November 23rd, 1963, John was working at a local market. It was kind of like a farmer's market or just a open air market type thing. But he was helping the stall holders pack up so that he could earn just a little pocket money, some spending money for a little boy. Now, as he was working, he was approached by Myra Hindley. She asked him if he could help her load some boxes into her car. Well, he agreed to help her, and then Myra offered him a ride home, so he accepted. Well, because it had worked before, Myra started talking about looking for that lost glove in the Moors. And apparently John said he would help her look for it before they went home. Ian was also in that car. So the three of them set off for the Moors. Well, 8 p.m. local time rolls around, and John's nowhere to be seen. He hasn't came home. His family's starting to get worried, so they call the police. But by then it was really too late because he had already been raped, strangled, and his body dumped there in the Moors where he thought he was going to look for Myra's expensive missing glove. Now, Ian had driven the trio to Saddleworth Moor, and when they got there, Myra says that, like the time before, she stayed behind in the car. Ian raped the poor little guy and tried to slit his throat with a serrated knife. But he wasn't successful at slitting his throat, and we don't know if it was because maybe the knife was too dull or whatever. It could be any other reason. So Ian took a string, and they think it was probably a shoestring, and strangled the kid with it. After that, he took a spade that he had hidden there in the Moors earlier, dug a somewhat shallow grave, and buried John in it. Well, like I said, the police had been called, and really they just thought, that this was just another case of a child that hadn't came home on time, and that he would show up sooner or later. And I know that sounds cold or, whatever for the police. And yeah, it would have been great if they'd taken it more seriously. But at that time, they didn't know that there was two psychos basically on a spree killing little kids, But, it wouldn't have did a whole lot of good for them to take it seriously. Because by the time, like I said, it was reported, John was already deceased. It's just, totally sad. I just can't even imagine. Now, it's been said that Myra was wearing a dark wig over her bleached blonde hair. But even if to me, okay, it just seems like somebody had to see him getting in the car with her, even if they didn't know that was her and what she had did. And even if they didn't think it was suspicious at the time, I can't imagine somebody not seeing him get in the car with her. I mean, I don't know. It just blows my mind that nobody saw anything. Well, it would be just a little while before they figured out what happened to John, though, because it wouldn't be until some more murders were committed. After those murders were committed, the authorities searched Myra and Ian's home on Wattlebrook Avenue in Hattersley, and they found an old exercise book. Well, written inside of that old exercise book, they found the name John Kilbride. It was scribbled on one of the pages, and police realized that this was the name of the kid who had vanished seemingly without a trace. Also in that house, they found several large photos that had been taken at Saddlebrook Moor. And they used those photos when over 150 police officers went to the moors and started searching for, these missing kids, or at least John Kilbride. But anyway, they came across a bone sticking up out of the peat, and they thought they had found John, but it turned out to be the remains of Leslie Ann Downey. And we'll be talking about her soon on another episode. I believe it's 2 episodes from now. 5 days later, they returned and they searched the other side of the road in the moors and found a badly decomposed body that they were pretty sure was John, but they took a shoe that had been patched up with cardboard to his parents to identify, and this is when they learned that these remains were in fact John's. Now, I can't even imagine the horror of the police knocking on your door, entering your home, and presenting a shoe to you and asking, does this look familiar? Did this belong to your child? I think, that after some time in the back of your mind, you would know that your child wasn't coming back home alive, but you also wouldn't give up that hope that they may come home alive someday. I'm sure it's just a big mixture of emotions, that you go through. But all that hope of him coming home alive went out the window while you stood there looking at your 12-year-old son's shoe. Now, my youngest son is 12. I can't even imagine that happening. It just breaks my heart to think that somebody would do that to Nick, and I can't imagine it being done to anybody's kid of any age. Probably would want to die right along with him, but then again, you have other kids, you have grandkids, and you have to keep going for those too. So I'm sure it's just a big mixture of emotions. Well, one thing that's an interesting little tidbit in all of this, and we're going to talk more in detail about it on a later episode, is that the picture that I'm using for the cover picture of this episode, and it shows Myra squatting or kneeling down on the ground with her little dog Puppet, and it's there in the moors. Well, when they first arrested Myra, she said she didn't know where any of the graves were, but in this picture, just underneath the earth, in the spot in this picture, is the grave of John Kilbride. Now, I don't know what the point of taking a picture like that would be. Maybe it was like a souvenir or a trophy for him, but they took a lot of photos of that area, and in the end, it would prove to be their downfall because it was used as evidence in the trial. But we're going to talk about that too later in a future episode. Now, I mentioned last week watching a documentary about these murders, and John's mom, Sylvia, was also interviewed on this documentary. She just seems like she seemed like a really sweet little old lady. She was a very loving person. And I just know that she was completely heartbroken when she lost her son, and especially in such a heinous way. Not that there's a good way to lose your kids, but it was just horrible. And John was Sylvia's firstborn child. Had to be completely devastating. And my heart breaks for her. I mean, I just can't even imagine that pain. But Sylvia, she passed away in 2002, which incidentally is the same year that Myra passed away. And Sylvia's husband, which is John's dad, Patrick, he passed away in 1999, so they passed away like within 3 years of each other. Now, John was laid to rest after, his body was exhumed from the makeshift grave that Hindley and Brady had gave him. But they buried him. They gave him a proper burial in Hearst Cemetery in Ashton-under-Lyne. And I remember Sheila mentioning that John was just this little cheeky, mischievous little kid, but when she would talk about him, she just had this awesome sparkle in her eye. And I was thinking about something through all this too. I was like, people talk about how bad things have gotten these days, you hear about things are bad these days. But, these murders happened in the 1960s. So things have always been bad. It's just that now we have the technology like the internet and smartphones and computers, etc., to get news a lot more quickly than what they used to get get the news. And we get a lot more news, I guess you could say, than what they did back in those days. But that's just a thought I had. But another thing I was thinking about was how Myra said she didn't participate in any of the murders, that she just helped him find his victims. But it reminds me of how moms will stand by and let their kids be abused by their men, or even killed by their men, their partners, whatever, and they do nothing to help their kid. Well, to me, that makes them just as guilty, just like Myra. Even if, and I have a hard time believing that she never participated, but even if she never laid a hand on those kids, she did find those victims for him, and that makes her just as guilty. They're all guilty. It's just really sick. It makes me sick in my stomach. It makes my blood boil. Now I'm like pissed, okay? But anyway, since I am getting a little fired up right here, I think it's a good time to wrap it up for today. Happy Labor Day. Y'all enjoy your day. If you're cooking out or on the road, be careful. But next week we'll be talking about Kenneth Bennett, and he was the third victim of Myra and Ian. And don't forget to come back on Wednesday. We're going to have an all-new episode of the Midweek Mini, gosh. And on Friday night, we'll have an all-new What the Friday. And on Saturday, we'll have the Weekend Weird Files. So we just have like a busy week every week for you guys. But anyway, until you hear my voice again, have a very great week. Be safe out there and love each other.